If you're new to us, we always like to recap these long form contents before we dive into actually discussing them. So we're going to jump into that now. And we actually cut that recap out, host it separately. So if you're on the recap video right now and you want to see our full discussion, there will be a link to that video down in the description below. So without further ado, episode 3 of the Ravening War, Yonder Where the Fruit Do Be Lying. We pick up with the crew at this bridge where they're plotting their ambush of this oncoming caravan. And
At dawn we plan.
at dawn we planned, and that is exactly what happens here. There's a bunch of discussion on what they should do, how they should do it, taking in their surroundings, what can they use in the environment. And they ultimately decide that they are going to try to block the carriage on the bridge. And to do this, they're going to cut down a tree and basically have it fall over, blocking one path of the bridge, and then roll down a nearby orange boulder to block the retreat path. So they'll be, caged in essentially. So as they're setting up the logistics of all of this, they decide that one of them should go scout ahead and see if they can see the carriage coming, just to get some more information, and then, relay that back to everyone so they can plan accordingly. Colin decides to be the one to do this, and they're coming up with a signal. He's like, so when I'm coming back, should I just yell at you guys, how many there are? And they're like, Karna and Amango are like, maybe it's time we reveal to them that we can communicate telepathically, as that would be a much better way of signaling each other. So there's actually this really funny moment where Karna reveals this by telepathically communicating to Delhi. And so he freaks out as soon as he hears somebody in his head, and everyone draws their sword, and it's just a really funny moment. So with the plan now decided, Colin rides out to scout ahead, gets a little stakeout spot, and does eventually see this watermelon carriage that is being pulled by a bunch of cherries start coming along. He can see that there's two drivers per se, two little outside guards in the front of the carriage, but that's all he can see, as he cannot make out what's inside the carriage. And Matt gives him the choice of, do you want to stay and wait till it gets closer, maybe you'll see more, or do you not want to risk getting seen, and do you want to go ahead and head back? And he says he decides to head back. So he comes back, tells everybody what he saw, and everyone basically gets in position. One last final preparation that Karna makes is she casts silence on the bridge so that no sound will be able to happen there, so that they won't be able to yell for help or hear any screams or anything. So the watermelon's approaching. Lady Amango does use her magic ring to see inside of it, and she can make out that there's 5 figures, 4 of which are armored, and 1 is robed and cloaked, so she can't see who it is. So it rolls over the bridge. The trap is sprung. They knock the tree over, blocking the front. And here in a couple of rounds, the orange boulder will come back and block the back path. But essentially, combat begins. And, as always, just going to hit the highlights of this encounter, which was the lion's share of the episode, honestly.
Right.
But the bishop's casting spells, but he's using his subtle spell so that no one can see him casting spells. And
So
he casts, very interesting. He casts Shatter on the boulder I referred to earlier, which is what causes it to roll down and block the path. Right. Colin is attacking, and we learn that he has a long sword of wounding, which does extra necrotic damage that cannot be healed except by a short or long rest. Thought that was really interesting. And as this combat's going off, the 2 guards that were out front are fighting, obviously, but inside the carriage, they've just walled themselves in, and they're shooting crossbows out. Because of this, Delhi just goes and breaks into the carriage. And as soon as he's in there, he's surrounded by 5 people. But he just rushes in and attacks the cloaked figure, which is revealed to be Queen Pamela Rocks. And he just rushes in and lets loose.
Bloodthirsty, man.
Yeah, and she asks Delisandra why, and he just says destiny has been designed. The guards that were in there then just all unleash on him with bonus damage because of this ability that Matt tells us about called For the Queen, which is basically they get a buff if the queen has taken damage, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
While this is all happening, a boat starts coming down the river with just a banana guy who's just, minding his own business,
Poor
rowing
guy.
down the river. And they're like, no witnesses. So Colin kind of reluctantly goes down there and murders this guy. Rest in peace, Banana Man.
Yeah.
um,
Banana split.
um, I'll save it for later. So we pick back up with in the carriage. Deli is basically getting torn up by all these guards. Um, Darren Quiche comes in to assist him, and the bishop runs up also to assist and casts another shatter spell, this time inside the carriage. Again, at this point, the bishop doesn't know who's in there. Only Deli knows. So he casts this shatter spell and actually gets the "How do you want to do this?" on the queen. And Brennan describes this really interesting segment of having had these dark visions his whole life. He's got these dark gifts within him, but he's never wondered where they came from. He doesn't care why things are the way they are. He cares in how he can make them. And so he says, butcher them, do what you will, come to my aid. And the shatter spell goes off, kills the queen. And it's only then that he has the realization of who he just killed. And he kind of like falls to his knees and, says, the queen who like mocked me, who I hated, I just killed, but it's like my biggest regret. He says it's a moment of horror because he's been played and everything he's been working for is like spilling away from him. He says he's a fool and a pawn. So after this, the crew finishes off the remaining guards, the final of which is this really cool gummy bear night.
Yeah.
And being the last one, realizing the queen is dead and the fight's over, he basically slams his spear into the ground and kneels and just says, like, finish it. Karna obliges him, and with the water still dagger, ends his life. And that's where combat ends. If you would like to take it from there, my friend.
Yeah, and such a cool moment of the water still dagger being used, by the way. So yeah, this sort of last remaining half hour of the episode, there's a couple of people, Amango and Rafael are immediately very much curious if Quiche knew that this was Queen Pamela Rocks, to whereas Quiche basically says, yeah, no, I had no idea. In fact, Amango is going to do detect thoughts and also dig deeper to really figure out, is he telling the truth? And seems to be telling the truth. Quiche is ultimately thinking about like their escape plan, kind of evaluating the battle, but seems to not be sort of like in a sinister way, like withholding any kind of information about this event. It's also around this time that Amango hears galloping like over a hillside nearby and immediately informs everyone like, we have to go. We got to get out of here. So the party darts out. There's a group stealth check, and Matt lets them know they're successful as they hear in the distance this troop of characters arriving at the battle site, a horn blowing, basically calling for help, and they seem to have made their escape. And as they are in their escape, Quiche is like, great job, guys. You killed it. And Rafael's super pissed off about this whole thing. Building on what Will mentioned of him feeling immediately regretful of what happened, is essentially like this is so much more messy than we thought it was going to be, and actually confides in Deli to say basically like, hey, I think this is more than just petty blackmail. Like this feels like something, I feel like we're being played in a much bigger way than we realize. It's also around this time that they hear something darting in the brush. There's a fire of a crossbow bolt, I think from Amango, that misses. And then I think it's an eldritch blast from Karna that ends up hitting this character, that as they descend on this character, they find this strange sapling-esque type character with a broken mask that's peeled off its face to reveal these amber eyes and a mouthless face. Very much vibes of like some kind of like mushroomy fungus type character.
Yeah.
And there is detect thoughts cast on this character, and rather than there being like vocal thoughts, instead there's images, and this is very clearly like a scared creature of some kind. And I don't know if it's Karna or who says it, but someone turns to Deli and is like, kill him. And without hesitating, Deli is just like, you got it. And does his multi-attack double natural 20s on both attacks and just crushes this creature. And there's this cool moment where Matt describes these spores that sort of release from it. And as they hit Deli, all he hears in his mind is the phrase, why? And with this done, they also note that this creature was heading to this cavern off on the side of this crevasse. They go into this cavern, just exploring, seeing like, where was this thing going? And they find like these tendrils, these glowing tendrils that are sort of going through the cave. Deli's going to touch the tendrils, and he immediately gets this image of this beating source of energy that he knows in his heart. He hears almost, it's not like I don't remember if it was like a vocal message or just like a communicating, like, this is what you understand.
Yeah.
But it's basically like, this is the heart of the world. And he hears welcome, like this sort of comforting welcomeness. He shares this with Rafanuel, who's casting Detect Thoughts on him. And then Rafanuel is actually going to cast Detect Thoughts, not as a subtle spell, so people see this happen, and puts his hands on the Venus structure and sees the similar beating heart, and hears a voice that is basically like much more apprehensive, and is sort of like, tell no one, like, don't tell anyone of what you've seen. Though Rafanuel asks something like, can the blades get me here, or like, are the blades after me, or some kind of phrasing like that, to which the source is uncertain. It's not really sure what is being asked. Quiche is kind of like, hey, we should probably get going. He's actually carrying the body of this sapling creature in his cloak, basically over his shoulder. And the party basically heads back to the food pyramid, where they see the FDA again, and the FDA is like, hey, great job, you guys did it. The party's pretty rightfully pissed off. Specifically, Amango is like, why did this have to happen? Like, why would you have us basically attack this kingdom that wasn't even involved in the Ravening War? You promised answers. We want answers. And the FDA basically says they admit that they are part of this sect called the Sanctus Putris. And I apologize for you guys who have seen Crown of Candy. I don't mean to butcher this. This was just kind of my armchair in the moment understanding. But essentially, this sect that believes in, it was very Thanos-esque, but it was very much the hungry one, this hungry beast. In order to be satiated and kept from devouring the world, there must be rot and bloodshed in the short term. And so what the FDA has done has involved a new kingdom into the conflict to create violence in the short term, again, to satiate the hungry one in the long term. And the party's kind of mixed on this. Haman goes basically like, I didn't sign up for this. And one of the FDA steps forward and reveals her mask to reveal herself as Archbishop Camille Cauliflower, back from episode 1, who basically says, well done, take some rest. Like, we'll call on you again when we need you. The FDA takes their departure with Quiche, who also they overhear him mentioning to the FDA, hey, I saw something pretty interesting. But we don't know where that's going to go. And then Matt, similar to episode 1, gives another, I don't know if we're actually going to have a time jump, but seemingly,
Yeah, we are.
Okay. He gives sort of this outro of another time jump of years passing, deep bloodshed, cruelty, and the death of innocence. And it seems that we will be returning in episode 4 again in the future to see where this group has ended up. And that was episode 3 of the Ravening War, Yonder Where the Fruit Do Be Lying.
Good job, man. So yeah, and again, if you are on the recap, a link to our full discussion will be in the description below.